Number one, if you sauna, you're going to burn electrolytes, right? So you need electrolytes. Do not sauna without, well, there's a lot of things you could do to wreck your sleep, right? You could drink alcohol and eat late and drink water before bed and, jump on your phone or your iPad or your computer and watch TV, and all these things can destroy your sleep. Fasting's incredible. It's the way your body heals. Notice the animals, when they're sick, they fast, right? So I do fast. I fast when I fly.
You are entering lifestyle dentist territory where healthy, wealthy, generous dentists choose to live epic lives on their terms with freedom and fulfillment. I'm your host, Dr. Garth Hatch. Buckle up for another exciting episode. Hey there, lifestyle dentists. Super pumped for today's podcast episode. It is going to be amazing. Good friend of mine, an amazing all-around guy, Dr. Adrian Accay. He is a pharmacist, very successful businessman, and functional medicine expert. Had an exit with his pharmacy business, did very well there, and transitioned into functional medicine. And as usual, the killer that he is has just created an amazing business there and has gone all in. And ever since I've known Adrian, you've always been that way. You don't do things halfway, like it's all in or nothing. And we kind of went on a similar journey where we both had exits, so to speak, with our businesses and kind of looking at what's the next chapter of our lives. And I was looking at doing lifestyle dentist and enjoy this different phase of life and how you can kind of have it all with your business and your lifestyle. And you were really diving deep into functional medicine and health. And so it's been fun watching our journeys together and just watching what you've accomplished, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Garth. I mean, I'm so happy to be here. And, it's funny because health has always been my passion, and functional medicine was actually really what I've always wanted to do. Just didn't understand what that really meant, and kind of going back a little bit, I don't know if I ever told you this, but back in like 2020, I got really, really sick. And, they initially thought it was some type of autoimmune. And then they hit me with the C word and they said, you potentially could have cancer. When they tell you something like that, it wakes you up and you really don't understand like what you're supposed to be doing. And, guys like us, we always did good in school, then we get undergrad and we knock it out the park, and then you go to grad school, and then your whole life is dedicated to learning and wanting to kind of give back. And when that happened, I actually started my own pharmacy business at a young age. So I worked my way up. I was a clinical pharmacist, stepped into the business world. And then I built a really nice business there with multiple locations. And we were very catered to a niche group of people. It was a 340B, and which was amazing. And what happens is when I received that kind of unofficial diagnosis and they put you through this kind of gamut of trying to figure out what's going on, a lot of things go through your mind. And the one thing that did step into my, kind of force, what I was looking at was, I'm going to be on meds. I got to take a ton of meds. And you start reading and you're like, okay, what is going on here? And that kind of is what sparked the whole idea of functional medicine. And you start reading about this, and it's an incredible world. And, very different from like conventional Western medicine where, root cause, it's very root cause based. And that being said, that's kind of what led me down this rabbit hole, and then going back to school for functional medicine. And when I stepped away from my business, I thought, hey, I'm never going to do medicine again. Like I'm just going to focus on real estate. That's going to be my thing, and, you join a group like GoBundance, which is very real estate focused. But I'll tell you, when you're really passionate about health, and that's exactly what it's almost like your why, right? It became like everywhere I would go, nobody would ask me about real estate. They were just asking me about health. Like, oh, well, what are you doing here? What are you doing here?
Well, you've always, at least since I've known you, you've lived it. It's interesting. I didn't know about that with your diagnosis, because that is definitely a big part of that journey, I'm sure. But ever since I've known you, I mean, you've been fit. You're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, which is just a lethal trained killer.
Yeah.
You got the six pack. I mean, you've just always been fit and healthy. But yeah, that's interesting that I didn't know about the diagnosis. And I'm sure that was a scare, especially being so young and healthy.
Yeah, it was very scary. And, it put a lot of things in perspective. It's like, hey, I've been working my whole life and building my whole life, and I had these two young kids, and I start making videos of myself to show my kids who I am, because if I'm not around, I want them to know who dad is. And it really kind of put things in perspective in the sense of what's the most important thing. And you realize that the most important thing is your health, right? And it doesn't matter what you have, it's your health. And that's what kind of pushed me to step away from the day-to-day operations in my business in Philadelphia. And I actually relocated to Florida, right? Sunshine,
Yes.
beautiful weather. One of the things that I hated in Philly was the weather. It's so cold, and I'm the type of person, I get those winter blues, right? So, and when I went down this rabbit hole of functional medicine, I started understanding why I had the symptoms I had, and was I living optimally? And yes, physically, I was super fit.
Mm.
Like you said, black belt in jiu-jitsu. I was training. I did Muay Thai. I did all the combat stuff, and then as well as lifting and low body fat. But that's not health. That's a part of
Right,
health, right?
right.
And there's root cause, like what's really happening inside of your body.
Yeah.
And then also there's the spiritual side, there's the mental side. There's so many different parts of health that kind of come together, and you
Mm.
tackle one, but you can't leave the other stuff on the back burner because it'll catch up. And especially guys like us, whether you're a dentist or a physician or any type of high performer, because let's be honest, whether you're in anything in dentistry, medicine, those are
Mhm.
high performers.
Mhm.
There's a lot of intellect and mental, and you're working hard and you're nonstop, and you don't realize it, but you're putting a lot of your health kind of on the side there.
Mhm.
And for some people, it catches up with them at a certain point. Some people younger than others. And so it caught up to me around the age of 38, and I had to really kind of reposition myself. And then once I understood what it was all about, easy, knock it out the park,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know?
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, and similar with my journey because I felt like I was pretty healthy and worked out. I Brazilian jiu-jitsu, doing other things, and was in the military, and just that was kind of part of you BT every day. You kind of stayed fit and tried to continue that on. But I noticed just feeling more sluggish, not the same energy, and worked with a couple different functional medicine practitioners. One initially, and another one that we both know, and it was amazing to see with real data to get your blood work done, and not just like the basic. People think, oh yeah, I do my blood work every year, every other year with my physician, and those basic blood tests they don't show a whole lot. And
No.
even those, they're looking at what's normal versus what's optimal.
Right.
And like for example, testosterone. If your testosterone is above 250, they consider that normal. Well, that's not optimal. I mean, back in whatever 50s and 60s, it was like guys were like over 1,000. And that was normal.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing when you can get things optimal versus what the Western lifestyle normal is, how things can improve and things that I didn't know. I mean, I had two parasites in my gut
Yep.
that was affecting me, that inflammation in my gut and other things that when I was able to get that all dialed in and eliminated, I had a carotid scan. This was something that blew me away. I had a carotid scan and I had done it when I was 39, 9 years before I did the second one.
Hmm.
And at the time, I gave me the score of a 37-year-old for my cardiovascular, carotid scan. And so I was pleased with that. I was like, okay, 2 years younger than where I was. And after doing the whole functional medicine protocol for the 6 months, my score went down to a 16, that of a 16-year-old. I mean, like
Wow.
just
That's
insanity,
incredible.
and it's like a real biomarker that shows it worked,
Oh
whether
yeah.
people believe it or not. It's like, hey, you can't argue with the data, and it's an independent lab. It's not like it was done by the practitioner that was treating me. It was an independent lab. So yeah, there's definitely something to that and finding root causes to problems.
Well, so it's funny. So I want to touch on what you just said. Is so funny that you said the parasite, right? I went through a parasite cleanse, and not only did I do it, my son and we both had food poisoning in Spain a few years back.
Hmm.
And ever since then, he's always kind of complained a little bit from his gut. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put him through a parasite cleanse. And 3 weeks into it, he's like, Dad, you got to see the toilet. He had worms. And I was like, oh my God. And it really helped him kind of after that. There are a
Hmm.
lot of issues because you develop a lot of food sensitivities and other things that you don't understand. And sometimes that's all it is just parasites, right? Which wreak havoc in your body. And then, you also touched on something really important, right? You talked about conventional medicine blood labs, which are really there to diagnose for sick care, right?
Mhm.
But they're not optimized. And so that's where it really big difference comes in is you could do blood labs and you don't need them from your doctor. Like, yes, you could get them from a physician, but you can also order labs yourself. You can see a functional medicine practitioner to help you get them. And they look at different things. They look at your optimal ranges, right? So, like a perfect example is blood glucose, right? Your blood sugar. I think typical range is, 70 to 100, and then over 100, it's like, okay, your blood sugar is a little high. But functional medicine range is really between 70 to 85. So if you're like 90, your body's kind of telling you something. So you got to start picking up on those cues. And you picked up, and you mentioned testosterone. You're absolutely right. Like if I'll tell you. So funny story. When I was 30 years old,
Mhm.
my testosterone, prior to me being 30, my doctor refused to allow me to test for it. Oh, insurance company won't cover for it, right? I'm sure a lot of people have heard this before.
Yeah.
So I never got a testosterone score before the age of 30. When I was 30, I finally did it, and it scored 550. Now, I didn't know a lot about that. I thought, okay, that's normal. That must just be where my baseline is.
Mhm.
So from 30 until about 39,
Mhm.
I was always within that range, 535, 575, and it would just stay in that ballpark.
Mhm.
When I started going down the functional medicine, healing a lot of the inner issues that I had and rebalancing my body, my testosterone jumped at 40 to 650, at 41 to 750, and I haven't been below 750 to 800 I'll be 43 this year, for the last 2 years. So I sit there and I think, like, holy shit, had I done this back when I was 30, I'd be at 1,000.
Right.
I was leaving so much on the table just because I didn't understand what was really going on. So it's
Right.
really important that you do kind of talk to a functional medicine guy and understand some of the root cause stuff and run through those modalities, because when you do those tests, and again, functional medicine tests isn't just blood labs. You have saliva labs, you have hair labs, you have urine labs. Like, they look at everything as a collective whole, and they put that puzzle together, and they can give you a story about what's going on.
Mhm. We should dive into that because I know that's a big issue on a lot of dentists. I mean, a lot of people in the group are in their 40s, 50s, and yeah, things they may still be healthy, but they're not working as well as they could. And how would you? I mean, first, I agree 100%. Getting it tested. What were some things that you did that helped increase the scores?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? So once you understand how testosterone is formed in the body, right? The hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal gland, like how those affect, luteinizing hormone from the pituitary gland kind of releases and tells the testes, hey, produce testosterone, right, through Leydig cells. And so it's very important once you understand kind of how the sequence goes, you can start to realize that sometimes it's something as simple as your body under stress. And so when we use the word stress, it's sometimes interpreted as mental stress, but there are so many different kinds of stress. Physical stress, right? There are guys who work out all the time, maybe marathon runners, or over push their body. What you're doing is you're putting too much pressure on your adrenal glands. Your body shuts down. Your body shuts down on reproduction. Because if you think about it, your body, when it produces testosterone, it's optimizing you for reproduction. When it feels that your body's under stress, it says, hey, hold on a second. You're not in the right environment for reproduction right now. Well, you are. We have to get you out of this stress. So it shuts down the testosterone. Sometimes it's not physical stress, sometimes it's mental stress, or sometimes it's oxidative stress. And this is where it's a big one because people don't realize what that is. Oxidative stress is the stress that's happening internally. So when we talked about parasites, we talked about, there could be gut issues, there could be liver toxicity, and you start to see these things in other labs. So like you see your glucose levels going up, you see your cholesterol levels going up. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's genetic, my parents had it," or whatever. I guarantee you it's a liver issue, because where does the cholesterol get filtered out? In your liver. Glucose, your liver, right? So a lot of these things end up showing up. Your liver's backed up, and you might need a liver detox, and you might need to clear things out so that your body works optimally. So you decrease the oxidative stress, and now all of a sudden you feel a lot better. You're like, oh, and your testosterone starts to ramp up. I guarantee there's people on this call they think back to a time when they were on vacation, and they go on vacation and they're like, man, I feel so much better. And they feel more aroused. They feel like they want to be with their significant other more. Well, there's a reason for that, because their body was under a significant amount of stress. Adrenal glands were, pumping out cortisol, glucocorticoids and all this. And what ends up happening now is they're not producing testosterone. And they go on vacation and they feel better. And now their body ramps up again. They're like, oh man, I feel great. I feel like I was in my 20s again. And then they come back to work and they're like, oh, I'm down. All of that plays a role. So once they start understanding that, you start creating the modalities in your life so that you support the actual production of testosterone, proper diet, proper sleep, proper supplementation for things that are missing, all the things that can actually help you kind of get to that next level.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, and there's so many different avenues on that. You're right. Just knowing first where you're at, and then how can you optimize it. And that is interesting with the liver. I did not know on that. Can you dive into on that a little bit more, like just how your liver affects a lot of different things, including hormones? That's
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
a
So
big issue with that.
absolutely. So, I mean, here, let's look at this, right? What is the liver's job in the body? It's a filtration of the body, right? It's your first pass effect, whether you're taking medication or anything, alcohol, things. So think of the liver as like a strainer, okay? And it has holes in it, and it filters out all this junk. Now, over time, whether you're, eating a lot of processed foods, plastics, alcohol, all these things start to clog up this strainer. And what ends up happening is, as things start to filter through, for instance, cholesterol, they don't all get out. And what they do is they start accumulating. So think about that strainer and you're clogging holes, and now you pour water in there. Well, it's not going to filter out as efficiently, and it's going to start building up. Well, that's exactly what's happening in your body. So taking care of your liver, this is why this whole thing, aside from like alcohol being, inflammatory, but think about drink alcohol, take a liver enzyme test, your liver enzymes are going to be elevated, right? Your liver's overworking. It's working much harder. So it's very important to really understand what is the function of the liver and how do I keep it clean and optimized so that it can clear out everything that it needs to clear out in the body. And so that's really the main function of the liver. And we're lucky enough that the liver regenerates itself. So all you have to do is provide it with what it needs, and it does the rest.
No, that is interesting. Because I know with the program I did some sort of a liver cleanse. I can't remember what all was in it, but it was like a gut / liver. But what would, if somebody wanted to cleanse their liver? What are some different modalities?
Well, there's
That
different ones, right? So you have to really talk to a functional medicine practitioner to kind of see, because there's an Ayurvedic cleanse, right, which
Mhm.
uses more like whole, herbs, and then there's like milk thistle, like functional medicine, dandelion root, and different things that you can do, and you could do it with a fast, right? So you get the autophagy, you clear out the liver. I like to add a binder to that so that you're binding to the things that are coming out, and you're going to start to see it. Some people have heavy metal toxicity, right? If you have heavy metal toxicity, then you need a heavy metal detox, and then you use a binder for that. Some people, it could be other things, like it could be mold, it could be other things that could be binding to the liver. So I think starting with a basic functional medicine detox, and you can find different ones. The one I use is actually from Equalife. They're great. I know the owner, I know the COO, I know a lot of the team. So I know, and I've gone through it, and I've gone through other ones, and this one I like the most. And then you can add to that, right? Like, okay, hold on. This was a basic one that I do, let's say every quarter I do a week, right? And then, but there are ones that you'd be like, okay, hold on a second. So I have heavy metal. So let me do a heavy metal detox. I have other issues, parasites. I need binders that go. And so once you understand that, so going through a functional medicine and actually doing a test to really understand what that looks like is really important. Don't play the guess game. That's what I always tell people. Don't play the guess game, right? Because you don't know if you're doing more harm than good.
Mm-hmm. That is a good point. That's a really good point. And that's probably my biggest take home with the whole functional medicine journey was know your numbers, because otherwise you're just guessing. You have no idea what's really going on. And you can test. My goal is to test at least every 6 months and just to know where I'm at, get that scorecard. One thing you mentioned too was glucose levels, and that's so common in the US. Diabetes, pre-diabetic patients when they get into their 40s and 50s. I can't remember the stat, but I think it was like over half the country they're saying now is either pre-diabetic or diabetic. There's so many different rabbit holes you can go when you really dive into functional medicine. And when you consider big pharma and the Western medicine style of treating health versus Eastern and other options with a functional medicine, approach, and it's almost you almost get angry initially because it's like, man, it's almost we've been lied to. And I know, as you do, I mean, we're both trained in Western medicine
Yep.
as doctors, and I know many personally, and I know that at least the ones I know are good people. Like they want to do what's
Yeah.
right, want to help their patients. They're
Yep.
not like, and yet they've been trained in a system that doesn't do anything really on emphasizing health, on their gut biome, on testing to see how do you optimize your life, and so it's all pushed by big pharma, and obviously there's financial reasons for that, where you have a symptom, okay, here's a pill, you got another symptom, here's another pill, and before you know it, you've got people on 5, 10, 20 meds a day,
Yeah.
and their body's so out of whack.
Yeah, so you bring up a really good point, and you said a lot there, right? Because let's dissect a lot of that. So I think nowadays, Casey Mean came out and talked about this, and it initially started off as something simple, right? You don't think that there was going to be a long-term harm when, for instance, you add a certain additive to a food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those foods, they're like, oh, okay, how do we prolong the life of this food? We're going to add this additive. But what
Mm-hmm.
ended up happening is when everyone started doing these things and adding additives and artificial flavors and preservatives and X, Y, and Z, and then plastics and, oh, plastic, oh, it's much easier to produce, like, easier for us to get, and we can ship it, blah, blah, blah. Nobody was thinking, okay, long-term effects.
Yeah.
They're thinking, I'm going to solve a problem, and this is the solution right now. But
Mm-hmm.
now that we're seeing this 20, 30 years later, we're seeing like, oh my God, there's an accumulation factor here that's really caused like hormone disruption and other issues in the body. Now, when we talk about blood sugar, it's a mitochondria issue. And so
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize that mitochondria really controls your metabolic health. And when we talk about metabolic diseases, obesity, diabetes, these are all cardiovascular, these are all metabolic issues. And so when you're talking about mitochondria, it is the powerhouse of the cell. And when you're young, it's working optimally. You're hitting, 100%. So you're fast metabolism, everything's working great. But as you get older and you have all of these things that we've been added into our food supply and water and products and toxins, and these man-made toxins in the US are egregiously high. Well, what ends up happening, they potentially disrupt your mitochondria. And so your mitochondria is now working at 80, 70, 50, 60%, and you start having metabolic issues like diabetes, obesity, and other things. So what you really have to go, if you're going to go root cause, it's like, okay, what's affecting my mitochondria? And so you take a look, and I actually have a list of like what I call like, kind of like your energy stealers, right? They steal your energy. And then, parasites could be one of them, toxins, plastics, phthalates, and I have like a list of like 30 things. And you start working on one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
You start kind of like I tell people, let's focus on this for the next month or two, maybe 3 months. Well,
Mm-hmm.
if you focus on each one for 3 months and you kind of start taking them out of your life,
Mm-hmm.
you realize your mitochondria will bounce back quick.
Mm-hmm.
And then you feel like you did 20 years ago or 15 years or 10 years ago. And so those blood sugar levels are going to start ramping down. Your
Yeah.
A1C is going to ramp down. Now it's gotten to the point where it's so bad that they'll tell you, oh, an A1C of 5.7 is not bad. It's normal. No, it's not normal. You know, even your AST and ALT levels. I forget what book I was reading, but they were talking about the marker used to be, I think, sub 25 for ALT and AST liver markers. Now it's sub 40 to be considered normal, right? Which
Yeah.
what changed? Did
Yeah.
we evolve in a different way? You know, it's crazy. So it's really just when you work with a functional medicine, you get to be like, oh, okay, here's what's affecting my energy. Here's what I can do. to get it better. And here's where we're going to start. Right. And it's going to be different for each person. And it's a credible journey because once you understand it, you do become kind of like an enigma in your own world. And you look around like, oh man, like, I'm doing things different than everyone else and I stand out. But once you teach that to your kids, you get to affect so many people's lives. And that's a big, big deal. And that's the reason why I really dove into this, because I was doing it for so long just to help people. But I realized, I always teach my kids this, and I heard this from Tony Robbins. We talk about levels of leadership, level 1, 2, 3, and 4. And level 1 and 2 are kind of like managerial leadership styles, right? Hey, I tell someone to do this and they do it. And then level 2 is I tell someone to do this and level 1, they do it in front of you. Level 2 is they still do it behind your back, but it's really like managerial. Level 3 and 4 is where they actually take what you teach them and they start teaching others. So level 3 would be like, hey, I'm gonna take what I know and I'm gonna tell the people close to me. And then level 4 is like, I'm gonna dedicate my life to this and affect everyone, right? Like the Gandhis and the Martin Luther Kings and the people who are really, those level 4 leaders. So I try to teach people about health so that they go around and they inspire the people around them. I want to create level 3 and 4 leaders so that the rest of the world can be affected by this. Because I think if we all kind of step forward into this world, like now, with RFK and all these people who are coming out, the Hubermans and the Atias and all these people are listening now. And then restaurants are going to be like, all right, we're cutting out seed oils and we're going to cut out this and we're going to do this. And it's not going to be so absurd when you go into a restaurant and you say, hey, can you make this without, X, Y, and Z, or can I get this instead of it's going to be like, okay, more and more restaurants are going to cater to that.
Well, it's amazing how, and I think COVID was a big part of it, and not to go down that whole rabbit hole, but it definitely opened a lot of people's eyes on, hey, what we're hearing may not be matching what's really going on with our bodies, with our health, with our healthcare system. And I think functional medicine really kind of exploded, like you said, with a lot of Joe Rogan podcasts and Huberman, and with RFK now. I mean, first running for president and then mentioning a lot of these things with the health, and now he's in Health and Human Services. So yeah, there's definitely been an explosion. Well, I think just there's a lot of people that are getting into their 40s, 50s, and 60s, the baby boomers and beyond, that they have disposable income, but they want their health. I mean, we both have realized that you could have all the money in the world, but if you don't have your health, it's worthless. You
100%.
really can't have anything better than your health, your relationships, your spiritual and mental well-being, because that affects everything else. So, I mean, the money kind of helps pay for the bills, but if you don't have your health and everything else, what's the point? It's all meaningless.
Well, think about this. Think about it, right? Healthcare, health insurance. How many of us are paying $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month for your family for health insurance, and you're not even using it, right? It's crazy. But you could spend a fraction of that on preventative health, and you never even need to go down that rabbit hole of like, oh, I need healthcare. Now, of course, you need conventional medicine. It's important, acute care, or there's things, without it, we wouldn't be where we are today. But I think that the value is in combining both, right? It's like, hey, maybe I don't need that top tier platinum paying, an egregious amount monthly. Maybe I'll drop down to like a bronze or silver, and then I'll use the difference for preventative health. And so now I can live a very healthy lifestyle, and I have my health insurance to cover anything that goes wrong. Right. And so I think that's really the mindset around it, is really understanding, because you're absolutely right. Like, what is it? A rich man has many wishes and a sick man only has one. I lived it. I understand it. I tell people it all the time. And it's so important that you focus on your health, and not just for yourself, but for your family, for the people around you. Like I sent the message. It was an Instagram that popped up on raising lions. It's a WhatsApp chat with some friends. And it said, are you willing to die for your kids? And it's like, everyone says they're willing to die for their kids, but are you willing to eat healthy for your kids? Are you willing to take care of your health for your kids? Are you willing to, spend time on your mental health, on your physical health? Like, what are you willing to do to be there for your kids? I remind my kids all the time. I said, listen, I don't just eat healthy for me. I eat healthy for you, for us, right? Because that's my way of giving back. I don't work out 7 days a week. I work out 3 to 4. There's some hit, there's some strength, there's some jujitsu. Obviously, I teach jujitsu 3 times a week, but I look at it as this is bigger than me. This is for
Mhm.
my family. I want to make sure that I'm here for you guys. My energy levels are high. I'm healthy for you.
Mhm.
And so that's how my kids remember me. My kids remember Dad's got a ton of energy. He's always willing to do stuff, and it's great. It's a great memory for your kids.
With the blood glucose, if and I know it's going to vary person to person what they're dealing with, but if you're kind of looking at the 80/20, like what are some good guidelines that anybody that's struggling with glucose, either pre-diabetic, diabetic, and type 2 diabetes, obviously not the type 1, but type 2, that could be prevented? What are some 80/20 things that you'd recommend?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? So obviously if your blood glucose levels are naturally higher, then there's something underlining there, right? And I would say that you want to really dial in and figure out what that is. But some of the quick remedies is like berberine, right? Berberine, taking it with meals will help reduce, that glucose spike. Eating high fiber meals will help reduce that glucose spike. Making sure that you eat, your fats and your proteins before you introduce those carbs. What kind of carbs are you eating? Are you eating complex carbs? Are you eating root vegetables and legumes? And things that are actually very healthy for you. There's this whole movement right now is like, oh, let's go keto or carnivore and that's cut out carbs. And that's such a broad word because there are some really good carbs,
Mm-hmm.
and if you're having gut dysbiosis because, hey, I get bloated when I eat these lentils or I get bloated when I eat, well, there's something else there. Let's talk about that. Let's not avoid it. Let's talk about it. And so, eating the rice, eating the gluten-free oats, the quinoa, the root vegetables, the potatoes, the yams, the sweet potatoes, the carrots, eating the lentils, the chickpeas. These are all really good for you. So they'll help reduce that glucose spike. What else you can do is walking after meals. This has been my go-to, right? I've been doing this for years. Like after you have a meal, go for a 15 to 20-minute walk.
Yeah.
Reduces that glucose spike, right? Which is going to lower your A1C levels. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
very important that and it also helps with digestion. And then
Mm-hmm.
understanding what spikes your glucose, right? Even if you wear a CGM, a chronic glucose monitor, for just a month, and you
Mm-hmm.
just understand, hey, these are my high glycemic foods, and it's going to be different from each person. I mean, there's also, there's like berries and all this, say, hey, these are low glycemic, but for some people, they might spike them. So understanding what spikes your glucose and being able to kind of navigate that is extremely important. And I
Mm-hmm.
say, like, when you do that, you get an understanding of who you are and how your body works. Because there's a lot to be said about, I don't want to use the word genetics, but like where your ancestry comes from, right? If you've lived in a certain area and you ate a certain diet for 10,000 years, and then
Mm-hmm.
you come and you're like, okay, I'm going to eat this diet, maybe your body isn't built for that. And
Mm-hmm.
so understanding that and knowing how to navigate it is very, very important. So those are kind of like my quick go-tos if you're going to try to minimize that glucose spike.
That is interesting. I did a glucose monitor for a month just to test myself, and protein bars. I was eating protein bars like 2, 3 a day.
Yeah.
And those were spiking my blood glucose levels, which I wouldn't have thought because it's not sugar,
Right.
but I don't know if it's just the different chemicals in them or something, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
That's
kind of crazy.
You see that? That's amazing, right? So then you're like, okay, what's spiking my glucose? Do I really want to cut this out? And if I
Mhm.
don't want to cut it out, what can I do to kind of, level out that glucose? Maybe go for that walk or take a berberine. And there are some people who jump on metformin. I'm not going to go into that too much, but I mean, like, jumping on a berberine. There's the GLP-1 movement right now, which
Mhm.
is, very interesting how that works because there's a lot to be said about how much you eat because
Mhm.
of, certain receptors or hormones in your brain that tell you, hey, I'm still hungry, right? So
Mhm.
you'll hear a lot of people say, like, after each bite, put your fork down or your
Mhm.
spoon down, right?
Mhm.
Chew thoroughly.
Mhm.
Make the meal last. And because, I don't know about you, but like in the pharmacy world, we scarf our food down,
Sure. Being
and
a rush.
so you're in a rut, you just overconsume. Your
Mhm.
body hasn't had enough time to release the hormone letting you know that you're full. And so you want to give yourself some time. So over consuming, and people don't realize this is a really important one, is that when you eat protein, over consuming protein will actually spike your blood sugar. So that's really, really important that, also what else spikes your blood sugar, people don't realize, is fasting and working out. Because when
Mhm.
you work out fasted, your cortisol goes up. When your cortisol goes up, your body immediately releases glycogen, glucose to bring it down, right? And so now your glucose is high. So just kind of understanding all how these things work and work together, you're going to be able to kind of help mitigate that. Again, this is once you've identified there's going to be some root causes, and you try to eliminate those as well.
No, that is interesting too. With the workout, do you have a little snack before you work out typically, or how do you work
100%.
out? You do,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. You have to eat before you work out. I know there are people who have like different body styles, like they're more endomorphic and they can kind of get away with that. But typically, if you really want to see, like, I feel like results, you
Uh-huh.
need carbs, you
Okay.
need some protein before you get into that gym. So you got to give your body fuel,
Uh-huh.
and then after you get out, your body, if you ever test your heart rate's going to be elevated for at least 30 minutes after that workout. So
Hmm.
you can't starve it. You want to give it some fuel. So give it a carb, give it an orange, give it an apple, give it a banana, give it something to feed off of. So you'll
Hmm.
notice that if you're in strength training, your
Hmm.
carb consumption should be on the higher end, maybe 200, 250 grams a day, right? Versus if you're like live a sedentary lifestyle, maybe your carb consumption should be about 100 to 150 a day. So
Hmm.
there's a lot to be said about feeding those muscles.
So say you're going to be working out at 8:30 in the morning, you're dropping the kids off, and then you're going to be doing your strength training. Like what would be, I'm assuming maybe 30 minutes to an hour or whatever before, or maybe not. I don't know. What would you typically
Yeah,
have?
so that's a good point. 30 minutes is great if you do it. So you could do even less than that. You could do maybe 15 to 20. So for me, I'm a big superpower food. I focus on the superfoods, that give me power. So I do my wild blueberries with pomegranate. I do smoothies, and I put kale, and I put broccoli sprout. I put
Mhm.
turmeric in it. I put my protein shake, and I take a multivitamin. I'll do an omega-3, and I'll throw some fats in there, maybe some walnuts. And every day I might switch it up. Might be pumpkin seeds, pecans, selenium. I mean, Brazilian nuts. And then you mix it, you blend it, and now what you have is you have this super shake, right? Think
Mhm.
about it. It's got your wild berries. It has your greens. It has your broccoli. Dude, broccoli sprout is incredible. If you look at the studies,
I've been sprouting lately. Yeah,
uh,
it's amazing. Yeah, I get like this salad sprout mix that's got broccoli sprouts in it. Yeah, it's awesome.
it's incredible. And then you throw your turmeric in it, and you throw your protein powder, and you throw, I put some collagen in there as well. And you mix it up and you put your fat and you take it, dude, you're ready to go. That's like a crazy amount of energy for the gym and superfood for your body. Your body's just going to feed off of that, right? So
Mhm.
that's kind of like my routine. And then as soon as I get back from the gym, I usually have like some type of fruit. I jump in the sauna, right? I like to have an orange because it's higher in vitamin C, and you're going to, that's the first thing that your body burns. So, and then I go into the sauna. I sauna for about 30 minutes. I have an infrared. And then from there, I shower, and I have like a protein shake or a protein bar, or I'll have something to eat. Sometimes it's a can of sardines, high in omega-3s and high in protein. And I start my day. That's literally my mornings every morning.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's awesome. On the diet, because I know this is something that's, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but you hear all both extremes, either the vegan, no meat, or carnivore, where you're just nothing but meat,
Yep.
or the different, what, paleo diets. And what do you think? And it may depend too on people's body types. So that's probably all the more reason to test and kind of see where you're at. But in general, what do you think is for most people is a healthy balance?
Yeah, so that's a really, really good question. And it's a very loaded question, right? Because is it red meat? No red meat. Man, I could go so many different directions with this. So just kind of,
And everybody's got their opinion, right? I mean,
well,
we
listen, I've looked at the
friends
studies.
that are like fit and they're all into, total vegan. Gabe, we know is a machine and he's all vegan. And then we've got guys that are great health and carnivore. I think it's more omnivore, but a lot of protein. So
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
what's
So
right?
so here's how I look at it. Meat does have, like, if you look at the studies, there, what is it, 5 new AC? It's anabolic, right?
Uh,
Meat is anabolic.
mhm,
And unfortunately, it doesn't just make muscles grow. It could make, cancers grow. It can make anything. It's going to make you grow. Now, if you're not at high risk, or you don't have these things and your body's working optimally, then eating red meat is not really going to cause that issue. It's not going to be, you don't need to live in that fear. Now, again, understanding what kind of meat is so important, right? Because you don't want things with processed soy, which are
Mhm.
going to increase your kind of your estrogen levels, your phytoestrogens, which can cause other issues, right? It almost defeats the purpose of eating the meat. So the grass fed, where it's sourced properly. And then, looking at things is also, like you said, your body type, right? Are you an ApoE2, 3, or 4 genotype? Because if you're a ApoE4, then your body's going to react to saturated fats very differently than someone who's an ApoE2. And an ApoE2 could potentially eat, you've heard about these guys who like smoke cigars or cigarettes and drink booze and, eat like shit and they live to 100. Well, guess what? You got the lucky ApoE2, genes where you can do that, right? And that's like 10% of the population. And then you have on the other extreme the ApoE4, the guy who doesn't eat red meat and still has high cholesterol and all these other issues. And most of us fall somewhere in the middle, in the three. And mine is I'm an ApoE3,
How do you
but
test?
it's a genetic test. You could do it in a genetic test, and you could figure that out. And once you understand it, then you're like, okay, here's where I am. If I eat too much red meat, yeah, it could cause elevate. And now we go down this other rabbit hole. It's like, well, hold on, my cholesterol is high, but does that really mean anything? Because my ApoB is low, or my ApoA, or and it's not really transporting. And then, well, what about neurodegenerative diseases, right? And then, we can all go into that. So here's what I say: moderation is key,
Mhm.
right? It's very important. And also making sure that your body is working optimally. If your liver's functioning properly, if your metabolic system is working great, your mitochondria is great, your gut health is great, and you're taking care of yourself and you're supplementing your deficiencies, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. Now, you look at a lot of the blue zones, right? And they're mostly plant-based diets. So, I looked at the studies on these and they were under 20% protein in their lifestyle and their eating habits, and actually only 5% of the 20, I mean 5%, so 20% of the 20%. So
Mhm.
5% total was plant-based. And so plant-based could be fish, eggs. We're animal based. I'm sorry. We're
Animal
animal
based.
based. Yes, yes, yes. So you're talking about fish, poultry, beef. Believe it or not, most of the things you kind of want to stay away from, you should stay away from pork, and processed meats. These are, high in nitrates. You're not using the cleanest sources. There's a lot of parasites there. So, making sure that you're eating clean, like pasture raised, organic, chicken, fish is, wild caught, beef is, grass fed, knowing that they're sourced really, really well and in moderation, not breakfast, lunch, and dinner,
Mhm.
making sure you eat high fruits and vegetables,
Mhm.
because you need your micronutrients, you need your vitamins and your minerals. That's what's really going to keep your body working optimally. Muscle is just one component. But
Mhm.
if my vitamin C levels are trash and my minerals are horrible,
Mhm.
well, am I really working? Is my body working optimally? And now I'm going to have a mitochondrial issue.
Well, and I've heard it's almost a little bit of a balance because, like, more protein is going to help you build more muscle, but excess protein can decrease your longevity. Your overall health and longevity. So yeah, it's kind of that sweet spot. And do you like say you're bulking up? Do you purposely eat more protein then, or no? Like, what's your thoughts on?
It's funny because the society that we live in is very like overconsumption based, right? If you go to other countries, the portion sizes are less, the food is cleaner, right? Less preservatives and stuff. So do I eat more protein? The key if you're bulking and you want to get big is going to be not just protein, it's going to be carbs as well, right? You
Mhm.
need carbs.
Mhm.
But it's very important to understand that you hear this like 1 gram per body weight, and it's not true. It's 1 gram per ideal body weight, right?
Mhm.
So you could weigh 180 pounds,
Mhm.
but your body muscle is actually 150.
Mhm.
And so now people are like, hey, I'm eating 180 grams of protein. And that you probably have some protein spilling, some waste, unless you're like an athlete, right? And you're training twice a day, your body's probably not using it. And I guarantee you, if you go do a blood test and you look at your BUN or you look at your creatinine clearance, it's going to be elevated. And that's going to tell you something, right?
Mhm.
And so also, obviously creatine is a really good one that can help. But again, not too high, like 2 grams a day. You don't need that much. Cycle on and off. It has so many other benefits, and it's been studied long term.
Mhm.
So I think protein is valuable. Also, timing, protein timing, right? So
Mhm.
portion control and timing so that your body's actually kind of hungry, kind of starving a little bit, not
Mm-hmm.
overfilling it. We all have this thing where I want to feel full. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
like to stop before I feel full.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a really good point. And I love that example of the smoothie before your workout. Like if you were to look at, okay, a typical day of Adrian's diet, what would, your snacks or meals look like on a typical day when you've got time to make it optimal?
Okay. So I mean this is every day for me. So it's
Yeah.
not going to be that hard. So what I do is I have the smoothie in the morning. Well, I wake up, I do a glass of warm lemon water with sea salt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I take magnesium malate with that. So cuz I have low magnesium, high functioning, fast oxidizer. I'm always going hard, so I need to make sure I take my magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that, then I go for a walk, right? Well, actually I meditate first and then I go for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of lowers my cortisol levels. And then, I do my smoothie, I go to the gym, and I come back from the gym, I sauna, I'll do like, it's different. Sometimes the banana with peanut butter, sometimes I'll do like an orange and then a can of sardines. I'll do a protein bar or a protein shake. And then from that point, I'm getting ready for work. I'll have my cup of coffee. I don't do any added sugar. So everything in my life is just, no sugar, which is, it's been a game changer. So, black cup of coffee, I source it, make sure it's mold free, toxin free. So, I use purity. And then my lunch is typically around noon. So I'm breaking my fast going to the gym probably around 7:30, And so lunch is around noon. I have it with my family. We're
Mm-hmm.
fortunate enough to be able to homeschool. So we all have lunch together. And I like to
Nice.
have a vegan lunch. That's my thing. So I like to have, lots of fruits and vegetables. I mean, lots of veggies for lunch and vegan. So whether it's going to be lentils or chickpeas or some type of, some type of vegan lunch. And then at 3 o'clock, I have a snack. And so typically that's going to be, again, sardines, nuts, protein bar. For some people, they might do, I don't do well with dairy. So I avoid like yogurt, but I know yogurt with like nuts is great. I have my kids do that. And then
Mm-hmm.
I have dinner, and dinner is always, I have an animal protein, and my wife and I decide on what we're going to make on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And I shop for the house. So typically we do two fish, two chicken, and one beef.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for dinner. And it could, we make sure that we always have like a carb, a protein, and fat, healthy fat. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's essentially like how I live and then at that point, no more food. It's six
Mm-hmm.
o'clock now. We're done eating.
Mm-hmm.
From 6 until 7:30 the next day, no food.
You've got a fasting window. It's just a practical fasting window, right? That, you're not going all day. It's just through the night, which makes sense. I mean, because that's something that's I think most people could do that. You just stop eating late, and I saw that too. Like when I was not healthiest, I was eating late, eating right before bed.
Yep.
Even sometimes, oh, what it's going to help me gain muscle, but I just wasn't sleeping well when I was
Yeah.
doing that. So
Yeah, you'll
yeah.
naturally notice your heart rate's elevated when
Mm-hmm.
you eat late. And the reason for that is your body's actually still warm. So when your body's done digesting, it cools down, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it's digesting, it heats up. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's going to naturally increase your heart rate. When it cools down, your heart rate goes down. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what's going to allow you to kind of sleep better at night.
That makes sense. That does make sense. What is your thought on fasting overall? As far as like, do you do a quarterly fast or a day or weekly fast or where it's I don't know 24, 72
Yeah.
hours
So,
longer
dude,
fast? What's your thoughts on that?
fasting's incredible. It's the way your body heals. Notice the animals, when they're sick, they fast, right? So I do fast. I fast when I fly. That's number
Mm-hmm.
one. So that's important because you want your body to kind of be, prepared for like any,
Mm-hmm.
because you're being exposed. I'll take like vitamin C and I'll fast when I fly. Number two is I fast 24 hours every week. So every
Mm-hmm.
Monday, Sunday night I have dinner, and I don't have food again until Monday night. So
Yeah.
I skip that whole day of eating. And that's my 24-hour fast. So I want to get that autophagy going, right? I do my daily, 12 to 13 to 14-hour window. Typically it's closer to 14 hours. And that's, I would say 6 to 7 days a week. On weekends I cheat a little bit. We might eat a little later, or I might wake up earlier. So I make sure I like go to the gym. I teach jiu-jitsu on Saturdays at 7. So I like to eat before I go there.
Mm-hmm.
And then quarterly, I will do a detox. And part of the detox, there's a 48-hour fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll fast. Actually, it's probably a little bit more. It's more like 50 something hours, but let's just say 2 days.
Okay.
So, or it's 60 hours. But yeah, so I will fast for those 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much it for me when it comes to fasting. Like every quarter, I'll do that, and then weekly. And I feel great. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm tracking everything. I test every 3 months. I'm
Mm-hmm.
making sure that everything is dialed in. I adjust my supplement stack. My omega 3s I'm testing to make sure that they're good, minerals, everything. You name it. I just run it.
And you mentioned on minerals the sea salt or Himalayan salt. What was the salt that you like in the morning?
Yeah, see, I use Redmond sea salt.
Okay, okay,
Yep.
Redmond sea salt.
Yep.
Any other electrolyte or mineral type supplements that you like, or just get it through your food, or what's your thoughts on
Well,
that?
so I think this is a big one too. This is something that people really need to understand. Number one, if you sauna, you're going to burn electrolytes, right? So you need electrolytes. Do not sauna do not sauna unless you're taking in electrolytes because you're going to lose them quick. That's the first thing. Second thing that's really, really important is testing what your mineral content is. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, LMNT, right? Unflavored, super high in sodium, 100, I think 1,000 milligrams. Now, that may be great for someone who has low sodium,
Mm-hmm.
who has on a HTMA, on a hair tissue mineral analysis, their sodium levels are low, potassium might be high. You need to kind of boost up the sodium. But what if your sodium levels are already high? What if you're stressed out and your body's holding on to sodium and it's retaining it? And now you're adding more to it. What are you doing to yourself? So really understanding, there's all these different electrolyte Ultima, and then you have LMNT, there's keto, which is higher in potassium. So for me, I don't see as one being better than the other. I think it really goes back to what your mineral and electrolyte
Yeah.
levels look like, and then you
Mm-hmm.
start there. So for me, sodium, potassium are good, calcium is good. So I'm like, magnesium is not. So let's up the magnesium and then kind of see where they fall into my ratios. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's been my focus. I'm not going to go there and start adding a ton of electrolytes or minerals. That's just going to spike them all up.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Getting back to knowing your numbers, making sure you know where your numbers are, so you can dial it in from there. And all that makes sense. Hey, on sleep, and I know this is a whole nother, could be an hour long conversation with sleep, but with the 80/20, what are your thoughts on optimizing sleep, and what are some things that people probably are doing to wreck their sleep? And I know I've been there.
Well, there's a lot of things you could do to wreck your sleep, right? You could drink alcohol and eat late and drink water before bed and jump on your phone or your iPad or your computer and watch TV, and all these things can destroy your sleep. Work out before bed. I think if you work kind of backwards from there, right? It's like making sure you're not eating 3 hours before bed, drinking 2 hours before bed, turn off all electronics, right? Don't be in that blue light. Making sure that you create a really good bedtime routine and keep it consistent, right? Your optimal bedtime is between 10 to 6. Wake up to natural sunlight, get your cortisol curve in order, and it's super important. You want to get those 8 hours of sleep. You want to make sure that your REM is between 25 to 30% of your sleep, and your deep is about 20 to 25%. And the reason for that is because your deep sleep is where your physical body kind of heals itself, and you're actually clearing out all of the bad cells, and also your immune system is kind of optimized. And then your REM sleep, it's really important too, because that's where your mind kind of declutters and puts everything in place. And you'll notice that a lot of people wake up mid sleep, and sometimes it could be from urination, it could be from a glucose spike, could be from a cortisol spike, but it also could be from like you didn't mind dump, and especially for guys who have a lot on their plate, they're constantly thinking, and those things kind of sit in the back of your head, and you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh man, I forgot to do this, or like what happened. You start going down this rabbit hole. Mind dumping will help with that a lot. That's a part of de-stressing. And I do so many other things for that, for sleep, like meditation and grounding and breath work, and breathing before you sleep, and journaling, and you could just keep adding. But I think, and blue light, I don't expose myself to blue light. I wear the blue light blocking at night, and it's super important to make sure that you kind of do these things. Now, there are deeper issues for sleep, right, where people could be suffering from gut issues or liver toxicity or other their parasites that could be keeping people up. But understanding just the kind of the surface level, when you talk 80/20, those are kind of your 80/20 things.
That's awesome. This has been incredible, Adrian. Seriously, I mean, we could go on for another couple hours. I want to be respectful of your time. I'd love to have you back too. By the way, this was
Yeah.
awesome. As far as people that would like to get to know you better, or Apex Functional Health, where could they go to learn more about you?
Yeah, so I really appreciate this time with you and these thoughtful and amazing questions. Obviously both of us we love this stuff, but if someone wants to reach out and find out more, you want to do a lab test or you just want to like jump on a discovery call and kind of tell me what's going on in your life and I'd love to hear that. You can go to apexfunctionalhealth.com. And if you want to email me directly, you could email me at adrian@apexfunctionalhealth.com. And I'm very responsive, and I'd love to jump on a call and get to know each one of your viewers.
Thank you so much, and we'll put that in the show notes too, Adrian. Sure, appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you, guys. Get out there. Make this is one more way to add, to your life to really become a lifestyle dentist. Take care.